CLINCHES.
Hi, this is Tim.
It's Kamala Harris. Good morning, Governor.
Good morning, Madam Vice President.
Listen, I want you to do this with me. Let's do this together. Would you be my running mate and let's get this thing on the road?
I would be honored, Madam Vice President. The joy that you're bringing back to the country, the enthusiasm that's out there, it'll be a privilege to take this with you across the country.
Well, let me tell you, I have just the utmost respect for you. I have really enjoyed our work together. You understand our country. You have dedicated yourself to our country in so many different and beautiful ways. And we're going to do this. We're going to win. And we're going to unify our country and remind everyone that we are fighting for the future for everyone. So let's get out there and get this done, okay?
Let's do it. Do the work in front of us. Let's win this thing.
That's right. All right, buddy. I'll see you soon. Take care. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yes. That is our current Vice President, Kamala Harris, and the man she picked as VP, Tim Walz. So I guess we can say now, safely, that Vice President Kamala Harris has secured enough votes from delegates to become her party's nominee for president without anybody voting for her, of course, according to Democratic National Committee Chair Jamie Harrison and Democratic Party stooge. The announcement was made before the online voting process ends on Monday, reflecting the breakneck speed of a campaign that is eager to maintain the momentum after President Joe Biden ended his re-election bid and endorsed Harris as his successor less than 2 weeks ago. Isn't it hilarious to think that just about 3 weeks ago, people were literally arguing that Joe Biden was competent and there was nothing wrong with Joe Biden and he could easily continue to run for president and run this country? Like, Kamala Harris is not the most competent person in the world. She's not the greatest speaker in the world when it comes to these types of issues, when she doesn't have a teleprompter. Just look at what happened when she ran for president in 2020, how many times she got caught off guard by even the most simple of questions. But just having any life, any joie de vivre whatsoever, makes her inherently a better pick than Joe Biden. And people will argue Joe Biden should have stayed on the ticket. But anyway, this announcement was made before the online voting process ends on Monday, which none of you have anything to do with because they don't really care what you think. So she is poised to become the first woman of color at the top of a major party ticket. And she joined the call with supporters to say that she is honored to be the presumptive Democratic Party nominee. Now, Jamie Harrison has pledged that the Democrats will rally around Vice President Kamala Harris and demonstrate the strength of our party during their convention in Chicago later this month. The DNC has not provided details of the voter delegate vote count, including a number of state-by-state breakdowns during a virtual event that had the flavor of a telethon, with campaign officials keeping tabs on a delegate counting process whose results is a foregone conclusion. No other candidate was allowed to challenge Harris for the nomination, and she swiftly solidified Democratic support in the days before Joe Biden endorsed her. Again, as I said, this is one of probably the most undemocratic way to have ever picked a candidate in the history of this country. Ironically, coming from the Democratic Party. The party with Democrat in its name and Democratic in its name has the least democratic process for picking their candidates. We've seen this in 2016, 2020, and now 2024. In 3 straight election cycles, the Democrats have completely rigged the process to cut out the will of the people at least in 2016, at least they gave the people the illusion that they had some choice. Obviously, the super delegates were really the ones who got to make a difference. In 2020, there was all kind of chicanery with systems that were run by Clinton supporters in Iowa, where it looked like Bernie Sanders was going to win, but then something happened, and then it ended up being Pete Buttigieg somehow, who again nobody really supported. And now they just circumvented voting, period. First, they completely circumvented the process to challenge Joe Biden. They didn't allow Marianne Williamson or RFK Jr. or Dean Phillips or any of these other people to really have any shot to debate Joe Biden, in spite of the fact that 70% of Democrats didn't want Joe Biden on the ticket. 70% of their own voters didn't want Joe Biden, and they still said, nope, we're not going to have a process. We're not going to have a primary. We're not going to have any debates. And now they finally recognize what me and most people who have sense in their head have been saying for years now, that Joe Biden is completely gone, a husk, a shell of a man, a husk of a politician, and wasn't really running the country, I don't believe he's actually running the country at all, but definitely wasn't really prepared or able to campaign in any real way. And it really took that disastrous debate performance against Donald Trump for the Democrats to finally admit what the entire world, outside of people who watch MSNBC and the corporate liberal media, already knew, which is that Joe Biden was gone. Joe Biden has been gone for years now. I don't know who that is, but that ain't Joe Biden. That's not Joe Biden, folks. So now we have this totally undemocratic process that chose Kamala Harris from a party that claims that its whole modus operandi is rescuing democracy, which is sort of, I guess you'd call ironic. It's the party that claims to be rescuing democracy, that has democratic in its name, that has the least democratic way of doing things. But hey, this is how it is now. And so, as you heard in the intro, her pick is Tim Walz. Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. So, what do we know about Tim Walz? We know that he was born in Nebraska and grew up in Nebraska. He wasn't just born there, but he grew up there, graduated from Chadron State, moving to earn a master's degree from Minnesota State at Minnesota State Mankato. He actually taught high school social studies and geography, first in Alliance, Nebraska, and then in Mankato, Minnesota, before he entered politics. We know that he got involved in politics after being barred from a George W. Bush rally. In 2004, when he was teaching, he went with his students to a rally, I guess an anti-war rally, or I guess it would be a George Bush rally, to protest, and they were denied entrance for having volunteered for the Democrats. So just like a lot of things in this country, you can blame George W. Bush for Tim Walz entering politics. This whole weird talking point that the Democrats have sort of latched on to, he is the one who started it. It was actually Tim Walz who labeled Donald Trump and J.D. Vance weird on cable television just a few weeks ago, and now it's become a Democratic Party talking point. Now this, I think they have to be careful with, because let's just be real here. The Democrats have spent the last 20 years saying you can't call anybody weird. You can't judge the looga booga tugga kamugga. You can't see a grown man with a full beard and mustache in a thong and say anything about it and say that that's weird. You can't see a grown man in a women's bathroom and say anything about it. You can't see drag queens at the White House flashing their naked boobs and say anything about it, or you're a homophobe or you're a transphobe. Liberals are the ones who've been saying, be weird. Weird is normal for the last 20 years or so, at least the last 15 in the post-Obama world. They have sort of latched on to what's up is down and what's black is white. And so I'm saying now Donald Trump actually is very weird. He's a billionaire, and so he has a lot of the idiosyncrasies that people like Elon Musk, that Mark Zuckerberg, that Bill Gates, they're all weird people. They're very weird people because they don't have to live life, real life. Everybody they meet kisses their behind. They don't have real relationships with people. You can't. I just don't think you can have real relationships with people when you are as rich as being a billionaire, which is one of the reasons why I, as a leftist, do not believe that billionaires should exist. It is undemocratic, and I believe inhumane to have people whose net worth is so large that they are completely alienated from the experience of being human beings. And so you get to be a weirdo like Donald Trump or Vince McMahon or Elon Musk or Bill Gates, who has, was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein, who is another billionaire weirdo. And so I think that might work when it comes to somebody like Donald Trump. But somebody like J.D. Vance, they are running the risk of making what is normal and what is somewhat has been seen as healthy for the entirety of, well, most of human existence seem weird. Basically J.D. Vance is saying we got to start having families. And if you show a picture of J.D. Vance with his wife and children smiling, and you show Kamala Harris next to a drag queen or a grown man who's like castrated himself and wearing a dress, I think if you ask the average person who's weirder and what's weirder, I think most people will say the woman standing next to the drag queen or whatever. Obviously, I think Vance overstepped his bounds when he said that Kamala Harris was childless. She is not childless. She is a step parent, and step parents are important. Okay? Step parents are important. Step parents contribute a lot to people's lives. So I think when he's talking about step parents, he was treading on thin ice, talking about Kamala being a step parent. That is an honorable thing, just like being a parent or an adoptive parent. We should be encouraging people to be parents in general. I talk about this quite a bit, something I've come to the conclusion in the last few years, that we are in deep trouble as a society, just like many Western and wealthy societies are, where you have young people who are not getting married and not having children. And so South Korea, Japan, and all these countries, Russia, there are countries all over the world that are freaking out because their young people aren't getting married and having kids, and a lot of it is economics. And definitely Vance needed to talk about that if he was going to talk about people not having children. And he needed to talk about the economics of why people aren't getting married and having children, instead of vilifying and calling people cat ladies and stuff. Miss McCready really shed a really good light on this on Monday, so you might want to look through the Facebook and see what she had to say about it, because she was on the money talking about that. But there is no reason to denigrate Kamala Harris for having stepchildren. That is a great thing, an honorable thing, and her stepchildren seem to like her, so God bless her. But back to Tim Walz, her vice president. One of the reasons that Kamala picked him was because he is rare. There are very few Democrats from the rural Midwest. And he represented Minnesota's 1st district, which is in the southern part of the state, and was the top Democrat on the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. He did support funding for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he voted for Obamacare, and he voted against restricting federal funding for abortion. So he's somebody who's been sort of, towing the line between liberal and conservative on a lot of these issues. He used to be more moderate when he was in the House, voting for stricter vetting of refugees, and he actually received endorsements from the National Rifle Association. But once he became governor, once he started running for governor in 2018, he changed his stance on guns and started enacting a very progressive agenda in Minnesota, though he is still a gun owner and hunts pheasants and turkeys. And he actually, I think he challenged J.D. Vance to a pheasant shooting contest, which, we used to have vice presidents and people dueling in this country. It only makes sense that maybe at some point we have a vice presidential candidates who are actually having a pheasant and turkey hunting contest. One thing you will probably hear about very soon is he did get a DWI. I'm sorry. He said that he stopped drinking alcohol after he was pulled over for speeding in 1995 and failed a sobriety test. He said that his wife told him that at the time, you have an obligation to people. You cannot make dumb choices. Now, he is known for a lot of very progressive things, but he did have a 100% pro-Israel voting record in Congress and has been endorsed by AIPAC, which immediately, for me, says pump the brakes. He has been very progressive in a lot of ways, culturally and economically. He's been pro-labor and a lot, and I respect that. But AIPAC does not endorse people who are not owned by AIPAC and will not allow them to continue to commit genocide and control American politics. I don't know if you guys saw this, but AIPAC recently just spent millions of dollars to get a Congresswoman, Cori Bush, kicked out of Congress. They funded a black man to run against her named Wesley Bell, who, you can even hear a phone call they had. He swore on his life that he would not run against her, but AIPAC paid him probably thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to run against Cori Bush because she was a member of the squad of the progressive wing of the congressional Democrats who had been very critical of Israel's genocide in Gaza and just Israel's policies on Palestinians in general. And they actually were successful. They got her thrown out of Congress. They actually funded her campaign. Funded the campaign of this Wesley Bell character, this dishonest, disingenuous Wesley Bell character. It's like Malcolm X said back in the day, they'll get one of us to do one of us in just to say it was one of us. And so that's what happened. So anytime somebody has a 100% pro-Israel voting record, at that point, I have to be very leery and very skeptical of them. He is all in on the culture war stuff. He put tampons in men's bathrooms because, his stance is that men can have periods too. In boys' bathrooms in high schools, because according to him, boys can have periods. He supports allowing men in women's sports, or should I say transgender women in women's sports, in spite of the fact that they have a whole genetic advantage. And he supports allowing children to undergo transgender genital mutilation, castration, and be pumped full of hormones. So, you know, he's perfect for these sort of modern democratic elite, you know, culture war stuff. One thing that I am seeing associated with Tim Walz is this phone call. Please hold, caller. Please hold. This phone call where they're saying that Donald Trump called Tim Walz to tell him he was doing a great job during the George Floyd protest. And this sort of grinds my gears. This sort of gets on my nerves about the modern corporate media and why they have no credibility. They made it seem like Trump called Tim Walz to be effusive in praise for Tim Walz, but they did not put the phone call in the full phone call in context. He was essentially praising Tim Walz for finally doing what he wanted him to do after days of not doing what Trump wanted him to do. The media's played an edited version of the call where he's praising Walz. Whereas if you listen to the real call, Trump praised Walz for finally taking his advice and calling out the National Guard. And then Walz actually agrees and thanks Donald Trump for his advice. So they were both sort of having this sort of passive-aggressive call where they were both sort of, you know, praising each other for helping each other. Trump was saying, you know, finally you did what I told you to do, and now you're a good guy, and now I like you. And Walz is saying, yes, Mr. President, thank you for your call, you know. This is, you know, but we're in silly season politically at this point, so both parties are going to, you know, do stuff like this, tactics like this to try to get the advantage. Well, I did have a caller, but apparently they hung up, so we are going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about reparations. Yes, reparations. Somebody black getting reparations. May not be me, but I'm happy to see anybody black get some form of reparations for anything. We'll be right back after these on Straight Out of the Cannon with me, Scott Cannon. 219-885-1371. That's 219-885-1371. We'll be right back.